So all the shelves that you see on this cabinet has been cut using my half-inch router. So this cabinet has got a whole lot of dados or rebates on it, on which you can see it over here, 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 and here, and in fact it's across all the cabinets. And that's the half-inch router which I used. Now, if you want to do the same thing on a table saw, on a miter saw, there's this handy jig from Bangood, and a lot of sellers are selling it right now. The basic idea is, if you want to have a jig to cut a precise mortise and tenon, or if you want to compensate for the width of your table saw blade, this is the tool to do it. So in this video, what we'll do is we'll unbox this, go through the setup, and see if it is any good. It comes neatly packaged in this box, and there are 3 moving parts to it. So one part of it compensates for the thickness of your blade, the second part of it compensates for the thickness of your material, and the third part is what you butt it against a fixed place. So the problem which we have with blades running on table saw or miter saw is the curve of the blade. So as you can see over here in the pencil which I've lined down, when you cut the groove, you have to make sure you cut it on the inside of both the lines so that your actual piece just slots in. The number one thing in all this is to get the thickness of your blade. So for that, I just clamped up the guards on my miter saw and used my caliper to measure the thickness of the blade. I know it's 2 mm from my user manual, but it's always good to measure it on the actual blade itself. And in my case, being a used blade, it is still around the 2 mm mark. Now let's look at setting it up. So pay close attention because there are 2 major things over here. So the number one thing is the bottom part of it, that is the first screw. You need to tighten that up. The idea is that the bronze part of it butts up tightly against the gray part of it. Next, keep your caliper, or if you know the exact size of your blade, there are markings on this side where you can set it up. In my case, it's 2 mm, so that's what I'm going to do. Now turn this thumb screw and tighten it up. Now this is the first stage, and with that you've dialed in the blade size. It's always a good practice to just double check your measurement to make sure that it is still there. Now let's look at the second part of it. So if you unscrew the first screw like over here and pick up the exact material so that you get the thickness of that and slide it in this gray place. Now once you hold it there, lock the first screw up again so that you have dialed it in. Now let's start cutting some test pieces. So I took my carpenter square and marked the line where I want to start the dado. And now with that, I just marked left on the left hand side and right on the right hand side so that we know where we are once we are done with the dado. And now with the completely dialed in jig, let's just do a small recap. The red side has been compensated for the thickness of the blade, and the gray side contains your actual thickness of your material. And now what you need to do to start your cut is to butt your workpiece against this jig and have a positive stop at one place. Now with the miter saw, I've set the depth height over here so that it goes in only like around 10 mm. And let's start with the cut. Now with the first line cut, let's adjust the jig. So what you have to do is remove the red part from the jig and then turn it around, and now butt your workpiece against the gray part of the jig. This should give you the perfect size for your dado. So let's see if we now have a really nice snug fit. So this was the initial cut which I made, and you can see there's a fraction of a millimeter loose over here. So all you have to do is readjust the depth of your blade on the red side, and then after that you can see it became a perfectly tight fit. Now this is perfect for any cabinet joinery on a DIY scale. And now let's do the same thing on the table saw. It's a similar concept where you have to readjust the jig to the height of the blade. The plan is to just create a dado like before and see how it performs. So I took the width of the blade. In the case of this DeWalt standard blade, it's 3 mm. The setup is really identical. That is, you first tighten the first screw and then move the red one to the width of your blade, and then tighten the second screw, which is on the bronze color. So just make sure that the bronze color is buttered up straight against the gray part. And then you take your workpiece and then slot it on the gray slot. And now push the bronze thing down and tighten the first screw, which is on the gray part of the jig. And with that, your jig setup is done. So let's start with cutting the dados. I'm going to use my mitre gauge for this operation. Now this is an off-market one from Rutlands. The DeWalt one is lying on the right hand side, which I rarely use these days. Now I'm going to set the height of my blade to around 10 millimeters. So for that I'm going to use this digital height gauge. Now this is also from Bangood. If I can get a discount code for that as well, I'll put in the link below. Now let's start with a cut. So butt the jig against the stop block, and that will give you the outer dimension of your dado. Next, just turn the table saw on and start the first cut. As you can see at this stage, there was an issue with my setup, that is, the workpiece wasn't going through. After thinking for a few seconds, I realized that the riving knife is blocking it. So I removed the riving knife and then I started with the operation again. And again the height gauge comes pretty handy. The first pass went in pretty smooth, you can see that. What you have to do after this is flip the jig around and now butt the grey piece against the stop block. Here's another view, that is, you pick it up, turn it around and then butt the grey piece against the stop block. This will give you the perfect dado width. And now for the moment of truth. Well, it is going to fit because we just did the same thing on the mitre saw. There's no issues with it. Well, this is absolutely a pretty good jig and it's spot on for getting perfect dados and grooves. With its aluminium alloy body, it is extremely a well built unit, and that's pretty much evident if you look at the product listing page. It has got over 400 5-star reviews over there. Well, full specs are available on their website, and just before I go, the max opening size of this jig is around 50 millimeter, which is around 2 inch, and you could accommodate a saw blade of around 13 millimeters. If you're interested, again the links are there below, and Bangood is doing a special promotion right now for $19.99. The discount coupon is also there in the description there. So thanks for your support and thanks for watching. Bye.